the first thing is, how do these individuals react to the support group? I would consider myself in a meeting the support group. I was not there to participate in the meeting per se. I was there to either support Dan's technology, presentation, whatever it might be. And the very best leaders were always the ones that would acknowledge my presence. They would say hello. They would introduce themselves.
Welcome to the Leader's Mindset, where we bring you conversations with leaders who are making an impact in business and our communities. Today, my guest is Dan Ward, the co-founder and president at Detroit Labs. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. What is Detroit Labs and how did it come about?
Great question. So we are a software design and development studio. Not shocking, but we are downtown Detroit. And we work with large brands to unpack some of their challenges, look for some opportunities in the marketplace, and we design and develop digital solutions for them. So we've worked with some really, really great partners over the years. Obviously, we are downtown Detroit, so the automotive industry is right down the street from us. So we've been able to partner with Ford, GM, Volkswagen, actually Hyundai, Kia a little bit too. And then we've also partnered with Jimmy John's. So if you've ever ordered a sandwich with the Jimmy John's mobile app or website, that's our partnership with them. And so we started the business back in 2011. The idea there was not really remarkable. It's a services company. So, but the idea was really based around mobile development at the time. I think that's what was really hot at the time. And it was something for us, ended up being a lot of opportunity. And so that's where kind of we got going.
And what I understand is one of your focuses very early on was user interface, user experience, kind of before other people were talking about that. How did that come about? How has that helped you as a business?
Yeah, we feel really passionate about building software that people actually use. There's the old adage, right? Of if a tree falls in the woods and no one's here or no one's there to hear the sound, did it make a sound type thing? Well, in our mind, if you build software and you spend all this money on software and no one uses it or they can't use it, was it actually worth your investment? Was it valuable? And early on, we really learned that it was important to make sure that whatever you build, whatever you invest in, it's solving a problem, it's solving a challenge, and people can actually use it. So we would draw a lot of inspiration based off of other apps that were out there that customers use. I mean, Instagram, Twitter at the time, right? Like, what are some of the reasons people use these apps? What are some of the design elements that really bring people back in? And can we learn from that and bring that to the corporate apps or the B2B apps even? And so we have found user experience really the way to get adoption when it comes to digital solutions.
Now, Detroit Labs has a little bit of a unique story as a startup. I understand that your four co-founders, the four co-founders, you were all put together by an investor like a boy band.
Yeah, it's so funny, the boy band thing. Yes, that is very true. We actually didn't know each other going into it. We I think all had like different ideas for this company, right? And I think we had talked to investment group different times, right? Completely unrelated. And then that investment group was like, hey, listen, I think that you all could potentially work well together. And they put us together. So stereotypical boy band thing. I'm sure we're not that handsome and we don't sing or dance very well, but we ended up working really well together. We kind of complemented each other. I talked about it like kind of a Venn diagram. There's not a ton of overlap. Like, we do things really well, and we very much bring different skill sets to the table. One of our co-founders, about a year in, went off to do another startup and a few other things. Great guy. Every once in a while, we run into him. But the three of us are still running the business. We have a leadership team, and we are still part of that leadership team. And it works well. I will say, I tell everybody all the time, when you're looking to start a business, starting it with people you don't know is actually a really, really beneficial thing, because you can get into a room and you can argue, you can pound your fist on the table, you can raise your voice, and then afterwards you can go get lunch, because you're not worried about this, decades of friendship baggage that might come with that. They always dislike me? Do they always disagree with me? You kind of ignore that. And I think it's a healthy way to start a business.
Yeah, I had never heard of this till I talked to you a couple weeks ago about it, and I kind of like this. I kind of like this idea of, investors see a lot of founders, especially a lot of solo founders, pitching ideas, and sometimes it's never quite right with the solo founder with the idea, but throwing a few of them together really shows some promise. And you talked about the one of the advantages is you didn't have relationship baggage coming into it with your co-founders like many co-founders do. What else were some of the advantages of being put together with a group of guys you didn't know to start a company?
Yeah, I think there's a general value in having just people surrounding you. So whether you know them or not, I think there is, listen, doing a startup is incredibly difficult. There are times that are really successful, and then there are times that are really awful, really painful. And I always joke around and say misery loves company. And so when it does get difficult, when things are hard, when things are miserable, it's really nice to have a crew that you can at least go to, and they're experiencing the exact same thing. So regardless of if I knew them or not, I have found that is just a really comforting thing, because over time, right, it hasn't always been roses. We've had our fair share of challenges, and being able to sit across from each other and know that we're all kind of going through that same thing, that same hardship, difficultness, whatnot. It's comforting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of data out there that shows that startups that have co-founders that are started by co-founders do better raising money in the early days. They do better scaling when they get to that point. They do better when they start to grow into a larger company. So in addition to it feels better, and you've kind of got that misery loves company thing, you've also got some hard data that says companies with co-founders do a lot better. What was something difficult about working with a bunch of guys you didn't know?
I think just trying to figure out what everyone was good at early on. I think there's probably some self-consciousness when you go into it wondering, okay, well, are they overlapping their skill sets with mine? Are we going to be in a situation where we're kind of like competing for the value that we bring to the business? And I mean, we were fortunate enough that wasn't the case. And I think a lot of the reasons that we figured that out rather quickly is because we became open-minded, and you have to bring some level of, the business is bigger than you. I grew up playing sports, and specifically team sports. And I remember coaches would always just say, the program is bigger than the players. And so there was no one player that was going to end up, taking the team to the next level. But that player, your best player could get removed and another one shows back up. The program, the team, the goal is always bigger than the individual. And I think that once we kind of laid the cards on the table, understood, oh yeah, this person's really great at finances, governance, understanding how a business actually runs. This person's really great at culture, growing the technical environment, the skill sets, the talent that we have. This individual is great at sales and marketing. It just became really clear that we bring complementary skill sets. And then where we overlap, we just kind of view that as like, that's the spot where you bring a lot of that tension, and I would call it healthy arguments.
Was there anything that none of you were good at that you had to figure out who was going to take it on as you got going?
Yeah, I would say early on, honestly, I would say sales. And I think sales in general have always been our biggest challenge. So I remember early on, as the person that had to do a lot of the actual selling and presenting and pitching to clients, I was incredibly terrified about showing up at a client's, office and pitching them about Detroit Labs and doing it well. And I think, early on, we recognized that was going to be a problem, right? You have to be able to sell your services if you want a business. Otherwise, you're business. So we ended up getting some coaching early on to help us figure out, how to qualify a lead, how to best present, the structure of actual selling, a lot of like sales 101 tactics. And so that was really helpful because we kind of all acknowledged that, hey, we don't have this. So we worked on that. And then it's kind of interesting because we really learned how to sell once we became face to face with a client. But the piece that we never quite learned, and that, honestly, I'm still kind of trying to figure this out, is that that outbound and inbound strategy, that lead generation strategy. And that's a challenge that we have even as leaders. And we've looked to expand our leadership group to help us solve that.
It's so funny because that's something that 10 years into this for myself, I still am working on the inbound outbound thing. Once I get into the room, it usually goes great. We close the deal, but getting into that room has always been the challenge for me.
It is incredibly difficult. And we've been, so far, we have a plan right now. We ended up bringing in a leader that has a plan that they've run in the past, and I'll be sure to let you know how it works.
That sounds fantastic. I would love to, if it's working for you, I'd love to get any advice you've got. All right, before we go any further, what's up with the sneakers? For those of you who are listening and aren't watching this, behind Dan are a bunch of shelves, and there's books and pictures on there, but there's a bunch of sneakers all over the shelves.
Yeah. Okay, so I think maybe I rewind back I was a big basketball fan growing up, a big Michael Jordan fan. I was a Pistons fan early on, but still, I love Michael Jordan. And so, every year I would ask and beg my parents to get whatever the latest pair of Jordans. That was going to be my school pair. And that was my one pair for the year until they ripped up. And then I would get a new pair going into next year. And, you may or may not try to accelerate the wear on the pair to make sure that you get another version. And then, it was just, I was kind of always obsessed with that culture and obsessed with the latest release from a pair of Jordans. And so once I ended up getting a few bucks, getting an actual job, I started to kind of collect shoes. And I say kind of, but I have like 60 pairs of shoes in this office. So maybe it's not a kind of. And the biggest thing is I try to get limited releases. So I try to focus my dollars otherwise I probably would have 200 pairs in here. But I also wear every single pair. So there are a lot of shoe collectors that buy shoes, put them away, never touch them. They're called dead stock, and they never touch them. And I do not subscribe to that program, and I absolutely love to wear all of my shoes. So they're on shelves, and when they're not on shelves, they're on my feet.
That's great to hear because, life is for the living and shoes are for the wearing, right?
Exactly. They belong on feet and concrete, and I sometimes get a lot of looks because some of my more limited ones I might be wearing out in the rain or I might get dirt on them, but, all shoes can be clean.
Yeah, and probably the worst part of that is someone who sees you wearing them who freaks out and starts yelling at you, right?
I have had some interesting, I wore a very limited pair unintentionally in a snowstorm in Minnesota one time. And I was checking into a hotel, and the first thing they said was, "Oh my goodness, I've never seen those in person." And they wanted to come up and look at them. Weird, but okay, sure. And then they kind of freaked out that I was walking in snow with them, and I had to remind them, like, snow is just water. Water repels off these shoes. It's just leather. You can clean it really easily. So there's been a couple different scenarios where that was a bit weird.
That is a little weird, but a fun story. So before Detroit Labs, you worked at Rocket, which coincidentally, I just got an email from my mortgage provider today saying they've just been bought by Rocket. So tell us a little time you were at Rocket and what your role there was.
Yeah, it sounds like you have Mr. Cooper as your servicing. The deal went through this morning. So anyways, I ended up, they were Quicken Loans at the time, right out of college. 2007, I think. I had applied for a job over there. It was technical support analyst, I think was the word. I would go around and replace keyboards and mice, and if a computer stopped working, I would fix it, that type of stuff. And I did that for about 3 months or so. And then there was an opening on the support team that focused on the executives. And so I felt like that would be an interesting opportunity. And truth be told, I really kind of wanted it because they got a lot of the newer technology. They got their newer Blackberries and the newer computers because the executives had those and they had to be able to support them. So they had to know how to use them. So that was honestly probably the draw for me. So I applied for that role. Was fortunate enough to get it. Worked with another individual on that team that supported the executives. And then eventually I had to go in and help Dan Gilbert with problem. And went well, solved the issue. And then the next time he had a problem, they called me, went in, solved the issue. And Dan and I got along. Not really sure. There's probably a lot to unpack for why we got along, but we did. And our personalities vibed pretty well. And so I started to help him in a more dedicated fashion. So the other individual that I was working with would focus more on the broader executive team, and I would focus more of my energy and efforts on helping Dan, supporting Dan. And that ended up turning into me sitting outside Dan's office. That was where my desk was. And then there was an opportunity one time where Dan's support crew wasn't able to go with him to New York one time. And instead of Dan, going by himself, he had a couple different meetings. There was, I offered to go with him. I was like, oh, New York, that's interesting. I've never been there, flying on a jet. Like, that sounds cool. So I offered to go with Dan. And I had an assignment. I had to get him to 2 meetings. And to be clear, Dan's very capable of doing this himself. But that was my assignment. And I had fun with him. And I think, again, our personalities worked really well. I was able to get him to those meetings. We had a pretty good time together. And, I started to go on probably 60 to 80% of his trips. Sometimes I was in a support role where I would support from a technology standpoint. Sometimes I was in a role where I'd help him build out a presentation, built out a lot of his presentations when I was working for him. And sometimes it was silly things like doing Photoshop stuff for him, to send an email out. It was an interesting role, and it evolved over time. So I found myself, like I said, from like traveling 60% of the time to 80% of the time, and going to a lot of Cavs games because you own the Cavs, and it's a great sports fan, and meeting a lot of people, and it was just a very interesting gig. And that was about 4 years, right up until we started Detroit Labs.
As you got more involved with traveling and attending meetings with Dan, supporting him in meetings, you got to see Dan as well as some other very high-powered leaders with a lot of responsibility. You got to see them in action. Yeah. What did you learn from those leaders and those experiences?
Yeah, I think there's always 2 things I pull. There's probably more, but there's always 2 that really, really get stuck in my head. And one of them it's kind of become a core piece of how I evaluate individuals, right, wrong, or indifferent. But the first thing is, how do these individuals react to the support crew? I would consider myself in a meeting the support crew. I was not there to participate in the meeting per se. I was there to either support Dan's technology, presentation, whatever it might be. And the very best leaders were always the ones that would acknowledge my presence. They would say hello. They would introduce themselves. The worst leaders were the ones that would just straight up ignore me or ask me to do something for them that, probably I shouldn't do, or nothing bad, but just like go get them something. And I'm like, well, I'm not your support crew. Why would you just assume I would do that? And so that was the first thing. I really noticed that people in high powers and high positions that would acknowledge the support crew and be nice to them and welcoming them and introduce themselves as if they were a peer at the table. Very best leaders by far. And then the other piece of it too was, and this was Dan's superpower. He was so, and is still so, inquisitive. So he would come into a room, and he might be in that room with very little background information, or he knew a little bit going in there. Maybe he did some homework and understood why he was there. Obviously, some of the bigger meetings he did a lot of homework for, but it was interesting because he would ask so many questions in the meeting. And what he was trying to do is, one, make a connection with the individual. Wanted the individual to feel valued, that they were in the meeting and they were having that time with Dan. But he was also trying to become an expert in the room. He was trying to make sure that he really understood what they were talking about, what product it was, what pitch it was. And he would always ask a bunch of questions. And the interesting thing was, after those meetings, I would often still be in the room packing some things up, and maybe I would talk to the individual that he had the meeting with. And their response was always, wow, he really cared. Wow, he really understood what we were, pitching, what we were selling. It's like almost like he did his homework and like he researched this. And in reality, it was just Dan being inquisitive. And I don't even know if he knows that he does that, right? Like it's just natural for him to ask a lot of questions, seek to understand. And I mean, now maybe he understands it a little bit more, but like in the moment, I think that's just him. And I really think that's his superpower.
Are there any other lessons you took from Dan about being a startup founder and how you run your company today?
Yeah, I think that Dan was always really good at reacting by his gut. So he always would say money doesn't lead, it follows. It's one of his isms that he always talked about. And it means a lot of things, but really it's acting based on your gut. And if you do the right things, if you try to get ahead of certain different scenarios, if you drive by your passion, if you stick with your plan, with what you know is best for your team members, and best for the folks that are around you, money tends to follow. And I really wholeheartedly believe that. If you're doing, like we always said, if we're doing the right things, success will end up coming. And that is that, money doesn't lead, it follows. And we still run our business that way. Sometimes the money following can take a little bit of time, but we still run our business oftentimes with our gut being a strong piece of the decision-making dynamic.
It sounds like Dan was a great mentor to you. He helped encourage and build your skills as a leader while you were helping him with technical issues or anything else he needed. What did you learn about mentoring emerging leaders from Dan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what comes to mind is access. So trusting Dan really trusted that I could be in the room with some of these very influential people. He trusted that I would be exposed to a lot of decisions that were confidential, but that I would keep them confidential. And I actually was in a meeting with him yesterday, and he brought an intern in. And that Dan has a pattern of bringing interns into rooms where they're big meetings. There's decisions to be made, and they're exposed to just a lot of different situations and dynamics in those rooms. And there's not a lot of leaders that would be comfortable enough to do that. And I know that's not isolated to me when I was with them, and I know that's not isolated to the meeting yesterday. There are a lot of folks within Rocket that started as interns with Dan, and they're successful because he gave them access and exposure early on. And he really he treated them as if they were going to grow into the organization at some point in time. So I really think that's like, if you want to be a good mentor, pull the curtains back a little bit, give them access to meetings, or allow them to ask questions. I mean, I can't tell you how many times an individual earlier in their career is just afraid to ask a question, and afraid to ask, like, hey, what went through your mind when you made that decision? Okay, just because oftentimes as a mentor, you don't think to step back and say, hey, I made that decision because X, Y, and Z, because you're not assuming that the individual cares that much for why you did something, but they do. And so if you can kind of give that culture of access, and that, I think that's what makes a great mentor. And certainly that's what made Dan a great mentor.
Yeah, I look back on my time in the Air Force, and the leaders that impacted me the most, the ones who impacted the leader I became later, were the ones who would bring me to those meetings, and they would tell me before going in, this is what we're trying to get out of this meeting, right? And sometimes it was, we're trying to get approval for something. Sometimes it was, we're just going to be in there so that they know we're here and we're were on board with this. There was always a purpose, and then it was always sit down on the side of the room. Don't say anything unless someone asks you a question, and then look at me first, and I'll nod if you can answer it. And then, most importantly, the really, really great ones would debrief on the way out, like on the car ride on the way back, going, let's talk about what happened in that meeting and how you think it went and what comes next. So
yeah, it was interesting. Dan he could be a really humble guy. And I think that there is an assumption on his part that why would I care why he made that decision? Or why would I care about his strategy for that? Right. And I honestly, I think that comes from a very endearing place, a very humble place. But he kind of flipped that and encouraged me just to ask questions because he didn't know what I wanted. And so I think it was just that, pushing of me a little bit. And then honestly, when I would ask, he'd give me great answers. So I knew that behavior was good. I knew I could continue to ask him. And he's really great about that.
Yeah, getting young emerging leaders to start to think like executives and senior leaders, start to think strategically is one of the hardest transitions in all of leadership. But that mentoring, that one-on-one, let's debrief it, ask me your questions, I'll try to explain as much as I can, is so critical to helping young emerging leaders become our future strategic leaders for tomorrow.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, you have to encourage people to actually be willing to, I mean, that works across just leadership too. Just encourage them to be curious, I think Dan uses that word a lot too, be curious.
I think it's, if not the most critical quality for leaders, probably one of the most critical quality for leaders, and it's not taught enough.
I agree.
All right. Well, let's take a break from this. Let's play a game. Are you up for a game?
I can do games. Yeah, sure.
All right. The name of this game is Rapid Response. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I want you to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give a one-word answer. Elaborate as much or as little as you'd like. Tell a story if you'd like that goes along with the answer. We love to get to know our guests, and we'd love to get to know you in a way that maybe some of the other questions won't answer for us, okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Dan Ward, rapid response round. Your time begins now. Podcast recommendation.
Ooh, conspiracy theories. It's on Spotify. It is hosted by Carter Roy. I personally am not a conspiracy theorist, but I am fascinated by some of the stories that they end up building conspiracies around. They talk about a lot of historical events, and they talk about the fact that these historical events ended up getting surrounded in conspiracies, and they try to unpack why. The podcast, they are also not conspiracy theorists. So it is kind of like an interesting, I don't know, my 11-year-old and I listen to it while we drive to baseball, and it's very fascinating.
So first, let me say I think it's great that you and your 11-year-old listen to a podcast together. I think that's fantastic.
We get a couple we listen to, so...
Also, if I weren't doing this right now, I would be downloading every episode I could of that podcast right now, because I'm not a conspiracy guy either, but I am fascinated by how historical events, because we live in an uncertain world and there are things that are uncertain about those events, turn into these conspiracy theories, and I cannot wait to listen to that.
It's fantastic. I have a history degree, so it kind of tugs on my heartstrings a little bit because it's all history at the end of the day.
I can't wait. I can't wait. That is the you win the. We're not even out at 2025 yet. I think you win the award for best podcast recommendation for 2025 on this podcast.
Perfect. Glad
so, if you're watching and you're coming on the show in the next few weeks, try to take the king down, I guess.
Love it.
What's your favorite pair of sneakers?
Ooh, great question. I'm gonna grab them because these are the ones that I actually did wear in the snow, and they are a collaboration between Nike and Travis Scott and this brand called Fragment. And I love the color. I love the pink laces. I love that they're Jordan 1 lows. There's just a lot to love about these because I feel like they can be kind of fun, funky, but at the same time, I wear them with a suit as well, and so they can be kind of dressed up a little bit, tamed down a little bit, but still add a little something. So they are one of my favorite ones. They're probably one of my more limited ones, and they are the pair that went stomping through a snowstorm and turned out just fine.
So
by the way, I'm picking my favorite kid, so just to be clear, that's very hard for me to try to do.
Yeah, I understand that. Hold them up to the camera for us one more time. Get it like right in front of the camera. Let's get a good look at them. Oh, those are pretty.
Yeah, they have been worn well, so they are one of my favorites. But I clean my shoes a lot, so they don't necessarily look like they've been worn.
Well, it sounds like you take good care of them.
I do. That's how they keep moving on me. So that's how they keep on my feet.
Who is someone we should all be paying attention to?
Ooh, just in general?
In general, or specifically, who's someone you're paying attention to?
Oh, geez, that is a great question. Well, I was trying to think of sports there for a minute because I play fantasy football and I was really paying attention to Tyreek Hill that went out yesterday, unfortunately for the season. But, all right, I'm in Detroit. The person I'm probably paying attention to the most right now is AJ Hinch. And then with I know I'm allowed to pick only one, but close second there is probably Dan Campbell. So the Tigers beat the Indians yesterday, Guardians, I should say. And so hopefully they have a little bit of a postseason run, and then hopefully the Lions aren't too far after them.
I hope so. The Red Sox won it yesterday against the Yankees in a nail biter, which is very typical for the Red Sox, especially the postseason. So I hope we get to see Red Sox Detroit coming up, and
if it knocks the Yankees out, I'll be happy.
We'll have to link up on a video or something and do a live watch together or something.
Perfect.
What's your pump up song or your walk on music?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is probably going to date me, and I've been introducing my son to this. So there's a lot of, I think, new stuff that I would love too, but Limp Bizkit. I introduced my son to Limp Bizkit the other day. My wife and I were actually listening to it in the house. And I think the song that would be my pump up would be Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit. It's a pretty intense song. I got some other ones that I used when I played hockey that would be in the same category, but this one is, I coach flag football, and so on the way to flag football games, I've been playing it for my 11-year-old, and he's like, "Oh, that's really cool," and warmed my heart a little bit. So yeah, Break Stuff by Limp Bizkit.
What's crazy is our local alternative station has been playing old Limp Bizkit stuff much more frequently the last couple of weeks, and that is in heavy rotation right now on the local alternative station here in Vegas.
Well, they've been on and off touring, and then Wes Borland, their lead guitarist, and he also writes a lot of the music with Fred Durst, he actually lived in Detroit for a while, in downtown Detroit, and I attended a party and he was there, and so I was fortunate enough to talk to him for a while, and cool, down-to-earth guy. And I normally don't, I've been around a lot of professional athletes my time with Dan, and I don't normally become a fan around them, right? Because you want to respect their space and stuff. And so about halfway through the conversation, I had to look at him and be like, "Hey man, this might sound weird, but I was a big Limp Bizkit fan growing up, and I listened to it before every hockey game, and just wanted to let you know that." And he actually was like super appreciative about it. I thought that was great.
That's cool. That is very cool. Who is the biggest influence in your life, or what?
Ooh, well, I have to say first and foremost, it is my family, because we are. I have my wife. I have an 11-year-old. I have a 6-year-old. Everything is about those two kids, whether it be activities, sports. My wife and I both coach baseball. I coach basketball. I coach flag football. So our life very much revolves around them. Obviously, there's probably some external things that are influential in my life, but realistically, and I even tell folks at Detroit Labs, like, family is priority. And I, if I'm in the office, I'm leaving at 4:45, no matter what. I'm getting home. I got a coach. I'll be back on later after they go to bed. So that's always my priority, and I encourage folks at Detroit Labs to do the same, and don't miss your kids' lives.
It's so funny, whether it's the time in the military or the time working with startups or even my own business. I have found that get that break in the afternoon, spend the time with the people you care about, get to those dinners, and then hit it later if you've still got stuff to do. And it works. It works so much better than trying to wedge everything into 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or wedging 24 hours worth of work into 8 hours.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you may not even realize how impactful it was for your family and your kids to be around during that time until they get older. And then I see a lot of people that miss that, and I understand it too, right? Everyone's situation is certainly different, but I encourage everyone to be as involved as they possibly can, because those kids grow up fast, and you're going to look back and regret it.
Absolutely. No one ever on their deathbed said, "I wish I spent more time at work."
Right. 100% true.
What is a book everyone should read?
Oh. All right. So this is probably going to expose me as not a great reader. But that is probably one of the challenges. One of my weaknesses, I should say. This will be cliche. I really loved the Steve Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson. I thought it was fascinating. He's a fascinating individual. I thought it was interesting to see like how he motivated people, not always in the most positive way. That's the first time I read about the reality distortion field, which was how he motivated a lot of folks over at Apple. Pros and cons to that, certainly, and I think the relationship with the folks at Apple weren't great, but he also drove innovation. And so the output ended up being ideal, I suppose. So I think that's a really good book. I just started reading the history of the CIA. I'm only like one chapter in, but Legacy of Ashes, I think it's called. So I'll let you know how that one turns out. But Walter Isaacson, Steve Jobs' biography was really interesting. I'm like I said, I have a history degree. So I don't do well with fiction. I like nonfiction. I love historical. I can maybe do some, historical fiction? I don't know if you've ever watched, is it Mankind on Apple TV Plus? It's historical fiction about the space race. That's interesting, but yeah, I digress.
No, I haven't seen that. I'm currently not subscribing to Apple TV Plus, but I know I'll be getting a new phone or iPad in the next few months, and they'll probably give me a free year of it or a free 3 months of it. So I'll add that to my things I'm going to cram into my watching during my free trial.
It is worth it.
What is your favorite fall recreational activity in Detroit?
Ooh, it's probably going to a Lions game. I think it was last year, we took our oldest to a game. Ford Field's phenomenal. It's really good. It's built to handle a lot of people. You've probably been to stadiums where it feels like, this wasn't really built to handle all these people, and it's like really uncomfortable. Ford Field was built to handle all of those people, so the concourses are massive. The beers are huge, so you don't have to constantly get up, which is really great. They've got a lot of self-service stations, and we had my son brought a friend with them too, and they just had a blast, like an absolute blast. And so between going to a Lions game and then hosting Lions game parties at our house, we tend to host folks for any of the games that we're not at. It's one of our favorite things. Kids love it. All their friends come over. We have probably 8-9 kids here, 4 to 6 families here at any given time. If it's nice, we'll watch it outside. If not, we watch it in the back room, and we have a good time.
That's great. It sounds like a lot when I was a kid. It feels a little bit like a time gone by where people go over to somebody's house and watch a game and all the kids come and that kind of thing.
We have a really, really good community here, and we kind of live in somewhat of an old school community where all of our kids jump on their bikes and ride around everywhere. They all meet each other up. Then they we're right by the high school that has really great turf baseball fields, so they can't ruin them if they go out on them. They all play baseball. So they grab their wiffle balls, their wiffle bats, they go over there and they organize themselves via their Apple Watches. And it's kind of old school, and it's really neat.
I love it. For all you young folks watching who believes that Stranger Things is not a real thing and those kids would be gone from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night without any intervention by parents, it's 100% real. That's how we grew up.
Oh, I mean, my youngest, my 6-year-old, went up to the high school. I didn't know about this till a little bit later. He went with the older kids, but he was up there, no shirt on, no shoes on, and rode his scooter up to the high school. And I had to eventually have a conversation with my oldest and was like, all right, you need to let us know when he's with you. And you need to encourage him to put shoes and a shirt on. He can't just be roaming around the neighborhood and just shorts on the scooter. So, but the beautiful thing is they all have Apple Watches now, so we can see where they're at, and as long as they answer, that gives them freedom.
Sounds fantastic. What is your dream vacation spot?
Oh, I'm not a huge vacation person, but I think it's probably Hawaii. We've been on some pretty good ones. We were in the Dominican Republic this past year, and my wife and I went to Greece for our honeymoon. So there's a few places in Europe I think we'd like to go, but I would have to say Hawaii, because kids keep asking about that as well. So I think the whole family.
All right, sounds fantastic. What is a trend you're excited about?
Ooh, okay, this is going to sound cheesy, but maybe not. For fashion, I happen to like apparel design, kind of goes with sneakers and stuff like that. We're going back to looser fitting clothing, and that is what has hit the runways the last, 3 years, 4 years, maybe even longer. And that is kind of calling back to some of the fashion of the 90s, where it was a little bit baggier, a little bit looser. So I'm selfishly looking forward to that. And again, weird answer probably, but I'm very much enjoying, instead of the skinny jeans, that I can wear a looser jean and still look fashionable.
Yeah, not a weird answer, but I will say it's probably the first fashion answer we've ever gotten, and I'm going to say I'm here for it. I like that the clothes are getting baggier. I'm kind of hoping we get to some, if that's really true, some brighter color stuff like we had back in the late 80s and early 90s.
Oh, I think it's coming. There's a little bit more neon coming around, and yeah, I think we're getting there. I think it'll be very focused on that like late grunge era design of the 90s, kind of moving into the 2000s. But this is what I'm seeing so far.
Yeah,
outdoor stuff too, which is kind of interesting.
Yep, trust me, you young kids who don't believe me about the Stranger Things and the riding your bikes all day long, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love the 90s culture, the 90s fashion.
It's nice. It's comfortable.
I think we already covered this, but favorite sports team or player?
Ooh, okay. I'm Detroit, so I've got Tigers, Lions, Red Wings. In basketball, it's actually the Cavs, not the Pistons as much. Pistons are secondary because I worked for the Cavs, so my loyalty went there. I think right now, at least today, I have to do a tie. So it is Lions and Tigers right now, because it's Lions and Tigers season. On the Tigers, it's Tarek Skubal. Incredible pitcher, completely dominant. We win games just because he's on the mound. On the Lions side, I think the easy one is Jared Goff, but I'm going to go with probably Amon-Ra St. Brown. He just transforms games. He's a receiver for the Lions. He's our best receiver, and he absolutely transforms games. So I know I'm only supposed to give you one answer, but we're in the middle of both baseball and football seasons.
It's a hard season. October's hard, right? Because if all goes well, our baseball teams are in the playoffs, football's in full swing, and hockey starts in like a week, right? So,
yeah, we've been fortunate enough the last 2 years to have a baseball team in the playoffs, and hopefully we barely made it in this year after a really cold end of the season. So hopefully we're turning that around.
Yeah, it's always same thing with the Sox. It's always a nail biter right up to the last day of the season, and every post game is a is a nail biter. But I hope we get to see that Detroit Red Sox matchup coming up here in a few weeks. So
that'd be fantastic, especially because you all outbid for Alex Bregman, for your third baseman. So he was supposed to come to Detroit. So hopefully we get an opportunity to beat you all, and then remind Alex of why he should have came to Detroit.
Well, we'll settle it on the field. That's how we do things. Yeah. All right. Thanks for playing our game. It was nice to get to know you a little bit where the business questions might not get us there. To get back to it, what led you to becoming an entrepreneur, and what was different becoming an entrepreneur from working at Rocket?
Yeah, I've been asked that question a fair amount, and I think I was just naive, right? Like I know that ultimately I'm kind of not a great employee, and even my other co-founders are the same way. We're not really great employees. We have a lot of opinions. Sometimes that can come across not great. So we knew that, all right, if we're not great employees, well, then we probably need to create an environment where we can flourish. And maybe we can create an environment where others like us can flourish as well. So, that was certainly something that was in the back of my mind. And then when it came to actually starting a company, like I said, I was incredibly naive. I was just like, oh, this looks like an interesting thing to do. This looks like fun. This looks like, maybe like that my challenges of being an employee wouldn't be there. But I will say the naivety, I don't know the way to say it, but being naive, I should do that. That really helped me to take the plunge. And that certainly helped me early on to just kind of ignore some of those risks. But I think where you do feel different than when you're employed. So when I was at Rocket is you have responsibility to produce for your team members, your employees. So now I'm not, I was responsible for myself and my performance when I was at Rocket, certainly to support others. But now I'm responsible for everyone's paycheck in a lot of ways. They just left their jobs. They joined us. I have a responsibility to make sure that the business does well so that they made a good decision. They took a risk. I want to make sure that risk is rewarded. So I think that's where it's different. Instead of just being focused on yourself and your performance, you have that plus making sure that you're doing right by your team members, your employees that join your startup.
You've done some pitching to investors. You've seen founders pitch to investors. What advice do you have for first-time founders who are starting to pitch investors or are even just thinking about raising money?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple different points of feedback. I think from the idea side, your business side, please make sure that you're communicating what the actual addressable market is. I've seen a lot of different pitches where they're just ideas, but those ideas, like, you sit there and wonder, okay, are people actually going to buy that? Like, are you solving a problem for folks, right? Like human beings buy based on pain. They have pain as either big or minimal as it is, and frustration. Like they buy something to take that away. And if you aren't being able to like illustrate what that actual pain is, maybe you don't have a business, right? Maybe you just have a feature for something that exists or an add-on for a product that's already in the market. Well, you can't grow a business around that. I think that's first and foremost. And honestly, one of the biggest challenges that I see, I work with Central Michigan University in their entrepreneurship program. I get to see a lot of pitches by students that come in. And that's one of the first things I say is, will people buy this? Like, who's your market? Why are you selling this? So that's one. The other one is that a lot of good investors are looking for good founders, good operators. So they're looking at your idea, sure, but really they're also assessing you as an individual, because a lot of ideas pivot, a lot of ideas just go away, and they want to know that they're putting their money in the hands of someone that can excel when that does happen. They're very much investing in in founders, sometimes more than they're investing in the actual idea. So those are kind of the two things that I give people advice on.
Yeah, it's so interesting that we all get wrapped up in our ideas, entrepreneurs, the thing that we want, right? And when you get to the point where you're pitching investors, it really comes down to what's the market, how is it going to make me as an investor money, and then do I believe you can pull it off? And there's a lot of detail and a lot of analysis you can do to answer those three questions for investors, but you'd be surprised how many pitches I see that don't answer any of those questions.
Yeah, it's I assume it will be used because I want it and my two friends want it. And it's like, okay, that may be true, but do the other 100,000 people that you need to buy this product actually want it? And you need to do some research and figure that out. And by the way, we have AI to help with that. So if you didn't use that to do some of your research, now the investors are probably questioning you as a founder. So now it's kind of like a double whammy.
We always talk about here in Las Vegas, I'm sure you've heard the same advice, go ask 100 people if it's something they want or something they could use or if they have that pain point, and then just take all the feedback. And if it's something that will work for somebody, chances are out of 100, 4 or 5 of them will say, how do I buy it right now? And we always encourage founders here, because in Las Vegas, we have this thing called the Las Vegas Strip and downtown Las Vegas, where you could talk to 100 people in a couple of hours, and it would be a complete cross-section of America and the world, and you could really get an idea of what your potential here is, the idea, by just spending a couple of hours out of the street with a clipboard.
Yeah, that's a good point. Being able to have that right there is huge.
All right, so being a founder in tech, what emerging technologies are you excited about? And also, what technologies do you find yourself using every day?
So I'm going to do the cliche answer because I've been using it so much lately. I've been using AI for rapid prototyping, and historically I've used AI for research on potential sales targets, right? So if a company either reaches it out to us or we're thinking about trying to do some outreach to an individual company, I do research on that specific company to try to figure out like who they are, what their revenue looks like, and maybe some of their challenges. So AI has been very helpful from that standpoint. It's able to digest earnings calls and market segments and market challenges and trends and like way better than I can. So from a research standpoint, AI has been just amazing. But recently though, we've been trying to prototype a few different ideas where we're wondering, is it possible? Is it possible to do something? And to be able to have AI somewhat answer that, but then also build a little React web app for me to test all these things out in real time it's really powerful stuff. And so that's one of the things I think I'm super, super excited about is the prototyping.
Yeah, I think that's exciting too. And I'm really curious from your perspective, because you're doing rapid prototyping with it, you're doing some coding and that kind of stuff. And we're all hearing that like AI is going to take all the software engineers' jobs. I'm curious from your perspective, what is the AI great at in doing this rapid prototyping? And then where do you feel like you need intervention from an engineer or a human to really complete the project?
Yeah, great question. So in this instance, AI was really great at writing. So it's a React website. So it wrote me a little quick website that allowed me to rapid prototype what I was trying to do just with a couple clicks. So it made it more accessible to me to use that. That doesn't mean that snippet of code is ready to go into a production app, ready to go into a production website. So I don't think AI is going to necessarily replace software engineers, replace developers. I think developers and engineers that learn how to best use AI will be just the ones that do amazing, that excel. I kind of liken it a little bit to, when I was in college, those that really learned how to use Google properly were those that excel. And I think it's somewhat similar, and I don't want to try to say that Google's as powerful as AI is. Certainly that's, different scales here, but really I think it's going to be, can you use AI to do some of the repeatable mundane tasks? Can you use AI to QA some of the code before you commit it to the main branch? Can you use AI to test something, or if you get stuck, ask it a question and have it give you a suggestion? I think those that can figure out how to do that are those that are going to be successful. And like I said, I don't necessarily think, who knows, maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to replace. It's just going to make engineers better who are willing to use it.
Yeah, I think I agree, but I wanted to get your perspective as someone who's doing it. And I hope that gives some hope to people who are interested in being software engineers or are currently software engineers, that you're going to be needed just in a different way coming up in the future.
One person told me, I don't know if this will come to fruition. They were talking to a bunch of senior developers, and the senior developers were excited about AI because they felt like all of the new junior developers would come in and only know how to code with AI. So they wouldn't actually understand what's going on under the hood. And if something didn't turn out correctly, or it wasn't right, or there was a bug somewhere that AI couldn't figure out, well, you'd bring these senior developers in. And so that their pay goes way through the roof. So I was like, that's an interesting perspective, because they talked about, entry level folks in software engineering, they're just going to use AI to teach them everything, or become a crutch, if you will. And maybe they don't learn all the ins and outs. It was an interesting anecdote that it was the first time I had heard that.
It's going to be interesting to watch. I will say, don't count out those young people coming in. If they start figuring out that there's opportunity for them, if they can solve their boss's problem before their boss knows it's a problem, they're probably just going to go ahead and start doing that.
Oh, let me tell you, as a business that has billable individuals to clients, the more entry-level folks that operate at a very high level that we can have, that stay with the organization, the better our organization is. So that I'm looking forward to.
Tale as old as time. As long as there's been commerce and capitalism, that's been a rule. Mm-hmm. So you talked earlier about, you brought some salespeople onto your team. You bring people onto your team occasionally. You let people go from your team occasionally. When you're looking to bring on a leader on your team, what do you look for? Whether it's someone from the outside or someone you're elevating from within, what are the qualities you look for to someone you're going to bring on as a leader?
It's a great question. I think the first thing, this might sound obvious, but a true understanding of our business. I think that's really important. We're a services business, and I always like to say that we sell hopes and dreams that sometimes are a little more money than you think they should be. And so it's a complicated world, and a complicated sell for us. And it really takes a certain individual that can, move through that sales cycle, stay positive, stay focused. It takes a certain individual on the delivery side, engineers and design, that can work with a level of ambiguity and turn that into a great product and solve that solution. So I think first and foremost, when it comes to bringing on a leader, it's the ability to understand what they're walking into, the ability to function autonomously, the ability to deal with ambiguity, and understand that not everything is laid out for you in front of you. And some of it's going to be learned as you go. Some of it's going to be implementing your own policies as well. So, that's a big piece of what we look for.
I love it. Curiosity, initiative, accountability, and strategic thinking.
Yep.
I've said it before. I hope they'll believe you, because they don't believe me. If you're a young emerging leader, curiosity, initiative, accountability, and strategic thinking, if you develop that, you're going to be on the path upwards.
Agree.
What's coming up for you in Detroit Labs in the next few months?
Great question. We are kicking off 3 projects right now, and that is very exciting. 2 that are quite sizable projects, and one, while smaller, has a lot of different and interesting technology challenges and components to it that I'm really looking forward to. So we are at a stage right now where, we're approaching capacity, what I would say. Everyone's on a project right now. Really, really great place to be. And kicking off 3 projects in the span of just a couple weeks brings its own challenges, but then also brings a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, a lot of positivity amongst the company, certainly amongst the leaders, but also amongst the company as well. And so that is the biggest thing that we have going on, because these projects will probably take us out till at least the end of the first quarter next year. So it's exciting.
That is exciting, and it sounds like if people pay attention to what's going on at Detroit Labs, with all the exciting things you have going on, you might need some people, and they should be paying attention in case there's an opportunity for them.
We're probably not too far away from starting the hiring processes back up. We'll see though.
All right. Well, get following Detroit Labs and Dan, and pay attention if you're looking for new opportunities. So for everyone watching or listening right now, what's something new founders can start doing today to get their startup on an upward trajectory?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say really understand your market, understand the position that you are in your market, and really appreciate how much you need to be selling. I think that is something that happens all the time. Is there's a lot of founders that assume they build a really great product and people are just going to flock and use this great product because it provides so much value. And they forget that key component, that you need to be out telling everybody about the value. You need to be out screaming about the value. And I think if you really want your organization or your product to grow, you do need to focus in on the sales components, the sales organization within your group. It's a piece that I would say we ignored probably for too long. We really relied on word of mouth for way too long, and we've transitioned that over the last couple of years. Some ups, some downs when it comes to that. But just remember, you only stay in business if someone wants to buy your product, if someone wants to buy your service, whatever you offer. You are only in business if someone wants to buy that. So someone needs to sell that to them. And I often think that is overlooked.
That is fantastic advice. And I know how easy it is as an entrepreneur to get caught up in the day-to-day of what we're doing and forget that big picture of we got to bring the revenue in. Dan, this has been a great time. I'm going to be following Detroit, the Tigers, much more closely over the next couple of days. I want to thank you for joining us today. Where can everyone find you in Detroit Labs so that they can thank you for joining us today?
Yeah, great question, actually. So DetroitLabs.com is obviously our main website. I'm not super active on social for a number of reasons, but I am on LinkedIn. So you can find me on there. I don't know the URL off the top of my head, but certainly if you do look my name up, I will pop up right away. And I stay off a lot of the other social platforms. Sometimes just on Instagram just to see what's doing, but I don't post a lot for whatever reason. But you can certainly find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, we will link that all up so nobody has to try to go find that on their own. Thanks again, Dan, for joining us today. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening, however you're getting this podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, go ahead and share it with someone who can use it. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're on a podcast platform where you can leave a review, we'd love it if you'd leave us a 5-star review so we can get more of these great interviews with people like Dan out to a bigger audience. We have a lot more coming your way in the next few weeks, and we're going to keep doing this as long as you're all willing to listen. So go out there, do great things today. Onward and upward.